Hey everyone, and welcome to the Boost Your Biology podcast. My name is Lucas, and I'm the founder of Ergogenic Health. Together in this podcast series, we will go underground to explore cutting-edge health and human performance insights that you simply cannot search on Google to help you upgrade your existence. So, without any further ado, let's jump into today's episode. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Boost Your Biology podcast. Today's discussion will be centered around how light can impact the quality of your health. And my guest on the show today is the founder and CEO of a premier global brand for blue and artificial light blocking products. He promotes and educates the science behind modern phenomena such as digital eye strain, poor sleep, and the connection these have with screen overuse. Through his innovative product range, he champions eye health, sleep quality, and well-being. Daniel Ebert, welcome to the show.
Awesome to be here, Lucas. I'm really keen to be able to share some of my knowledge with your audience.
Awesome. So maybe, Daniel, did you want to let my listeners know a little bit about your journey and I guess how you got fascinated into how light impacts health?
Yeah, sure. For me, it started quite a while ago. So we're talking about 8 years ago. I was just starting out my career in IT. And yeah, back then I always considered myself quite a healthy person, really took health first. Fitness was big for me, competing in powerlifting. And very quickly into my career into IT, I started to get quite severe insomnia and really bad migraines. And I kind of did what most people would do. You'd go to your GP and try and get some answers and get some things to help. And ultimately led me down a path of actually making things worse. They prescribed me a whole bunch of different medications like antipsychotics, antidepressants, things like just literally trying to help with the insomnia. But yeah, so after many failed attempts and just honestly feeling worse and worse, I fired my GP, is what I like to say, and really just started to do some deep dive into trying to work out what's changed in my environment to cause this, because obviously there has to be some sort of trigger. Like, I've considered myself a really healthy person, was sleeping well, had good energy, was really breaking records in the gym and stuff. And then I came across the work of a neurosurgeon in the US called Dr. Jack Kruse. And he was really big about talking about how light can impact our circadian rhythms and how light ultimately is responsible for many biological processes in the body. And that kind of was like a little bit of a light bulb moment where I was like, okay, I'm now working indoors under artificial lighting on screens all day. And then I would also I would go from work, so inside all day, then to the gym under artificial light there, train, and then I'd come home and then work out of hours to do like IT changes. So I was kind of just like bouncing around all these artificial light environments and not really getting any natural light at all. And back then, so this, 8 years ago, there wasn't really much around the discussions around artificial light and how it can potentially be impacting our health. But I decided that I was going to just try and find a pair of glasses that could mitigate most of the blue light. And there was a pair of like safety glasses brand I found in the US, and these big welding glasses sort of thing. So I imported them in and started wearing them. Even put them on in the office and stuff, and people were just like, who is this guy? I was only like my first year there, and like people were just like, this guy's nuts, eh? Like this Kiwi's come over here and he's wearing these weird glasses. But it was quite remarkable. Within the space of like a couple of weeks, I just turned my sleep around, migraine started to reduce, and the turnaround of my health, it took a number of months, but there was a number of months of actually destroying my health. So my hormonal health really started to suffer from the lack of sleep. And so that led to like gut dysfunction, and essentially the body started breaking down. So the reverse of that took a while, but to me, it was such a profound effect from something so simple, right? Like all these prescription drugs that I had tried and everything was ultimately trying to band-aid this problem, which made it worse. And then so from there, I was hooked on the subject. I couldn't keep it to myself, because it was quite a bit of pain and suffering to go through. So I was like, how can I actually help other people? So I just started importing those glasses and selling them 8 years ago, just slapped up a website and was just like, people have got to know about this. Yeah. So fast forward 8 years, and obviously we've come a long way from the welding glasses to really just being like looking at light in general and how we're utilizing artificial light in our environments, and really trying to understand how we can like merge technology and health together, because ultimately I don't think we can say like turn off all tech, don't have any lights on your home, and stay outside all day, because it's not practical. So it's about finding ways to get the most out of technology without it harming our health. And that's kind of what we do today.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Daniel, because I actually remember when I first found out about the blue blockers, I think the brand that I was using was the Uvex brand. They just looked absolutely atrocious. But I remember the impact that it had immediately on my sleep quality. Until this day, like I'm still wearing blue blockers every single night. There's a reason for that. It's because I've seen the data on my Oura Ring, I've seen the data on my BioStrap, and time again, wearing blue blockers significantly improves not only my sleep quality, but also like ability to fall asleep. So getting tired at the right times. So let's dive deep into, I guess, the different types of blue blockers out there on the market. You have ones that are like, they barely have any tint, so they have no orange look. You have other ones that are crystal clear, but they still say that they block blue light. So maybe let's dive deep into those.
Yeah. So obviously the issue we face today is the blue blocking industry has become a little bit of a fad where people have jumped on the bandwagon because they think they can make a quick buck. And unfortunately, when that happens, there's a lot of people that will sell anything and make any claims around them and people will sort of jump on and buy it, right? So you can buy, glasses as cheap as like $10 on Amazon, and they'll say they're blue light glasses. So yeah, it really, really comes down to, first of all, understanding the types of light we want to be exposed to at different times of the day. So there's not like a one size fits all here. And so, yeah, the most common things you'll find on the market are like these clear lens glasses. So they almost look like just a normal set of glasses, and they'll have a reflective coating on the outside. And when you kind of hold it up to light, you'll see kind of blue reflecting off it. And that's a very basic coating that's put on glasses. And unfortunately, that doesn't do a hell of a lot. It does actually filter out some blue light or reflect it off the lens. Yeah. But unfortunately, that technology will only filter or reflect off blue light in the lower part of the spectrum. So when you measure blue light, it ranges from 400 nanometers through to 500. Now, most of the artificial lighting we're getting exposed to during the day, from our screens and LED lighting and our phones, has a really, really large and narrow spike of blue light around 455 nanometers. So that's actually what's doing the most damage to our eyes, and that's actually what we're getting far too much intense narrow bandwidth of blue light from. So that's really what we need to focus on. Now, unfortunately, those reflective coatings can only filter up to about 420 or 430 nanometers.
Wow.
And so it's really tricky with marketing, because you could come out and say, these block or filter 50% of blue light, and then put in an asterisk up to 430 nanometers.
Wow.
So the reality of that is your exposure to artificial light from 400 to 430 nanometers is very little. There's very little coming off screens, not to an effect that would actually be harming you.
Right.
So when it comes to, and this is around daytime, we're specifically talking about, because what's happening during the daytime is we're indoors a lot. We're not getting full spectrum light. So the sun is full spectrum. There's blue in there, plenty of blue, but it's all balanced. It's balanced with all the other colors of the rainbow, plus your infrared and your UV. And so that's what we call full spectrum light. And a lot of the arguments people will say is like, blue light's everywhere, it's not bad for you. And that's true in context, right? It's not bad for you when it's in complete balance. But when you come indoors and you strip out all of the infrared and all the reds, and then you just get a very narrow bandwidth of blue, high energy, visible light, that's when it becomes a problem. And that's when it's not balanced with all the reds and the regeneration and healing wavelengths to balance out the more, damaging oxidation wavelengths of blue. So when you put all those into your eyes in a short, narrow bandwidth, that's when it starts to cause problems. So really what the daytime is about is lowering that exposure of intense blue light down to more kind of more, I wouldn't say natural levels, but a lower level where it's not having such a detrimental impact. So really what that's about is lowering the 455 nanometer spike. And ideally you need to bring that down by 50% at a minimum. And then you can't do that with a clear lens.
Yeah.
So
it's not possible with a clear lens to actually block the harmful aspect, right?
So yeah, there's all ranges of, so most of the common ones you'll find, even optometrists will sell like a filter. You want a filter with your thing. If you query them and go, cool, I'll have your $50 add-on of this filter. You ask them, how much is it filtering and what wavelengths? And they'll kind of just give you a blank look and go, it's a blue light filter. So, which then people go, oh, perfect, I'm protected from the blue light. Which the reality is, unless you can get a light spectrum report or something to actually, it shows an analytical like data of exactly what's being filtered. So if you're buying a set, a company should be able to provide that to you. So you can, they should have that on record because they should know what they're selling. And then you should be able to look at that and look exactly at what wavelengths are filtered down and by what percentage. So we do have a clearish looking lens. I say clearish because it's not clear. So we actually embed special melanin pigments inside the lens. And so what that does is it's not reflecting off with the coating. We do put that coating on there and it reflects that lower portion like I talked about. But to get from the 430 through to around the 455, it's actually absorbing the light and the pigment as it passes through the lens.
Right.
So that's actually a completely different technology, which is a lot more specialized to actually create. So that's what we do, and like it's not crystal clear. So like if I have them on, I actually got a set of yellow ones on at the moment, but if I had a set of clear ones on, they would look clear, but they're actually, if you held them up to like a bit of white, it would make it off white a little bit. And that's kind of how you know there's some pigment inside there that's actually absorbing light as it passes through before it hits your eyes.
Interesting. What about as far as like, let's say for a typical customer, like how would they ever know, like, is there a blue light they can shine? Let's sort of break that down.
Yeah, that's a good one. The blue light pen test. So I've seen that heaps of times. So even these like cheap ones, they'll give you a little laser pointer with the glasses, and they're like, cool, what you want to do is, you put a bit of white paper behind it, and then you shine the blue light at the lens and it doesn't come out the other side. And they're like, see, look, it must, here's a blue light pen, laser pen, and you can shine it at my lens, it doesn't come through. Shine it at another lens and it goes straight through. And you must be like, yeah, I kind of saw that and I was like, I need to work this out because that, like, from a physics point of view, that doesn't make sense. So I've actually got like a lab grade spectrometer, which I can actually test spectrums of any emitting light source and work out exactly what it's doing. So I actually ordered a pair and got the pen and tested it, and it's actually quite funny because it's actually emitting violet light. It's not blue light, yeah. So because blue and violet can look very similar to the eye, right? So it's actually emitting right down in the high 380 to 400 nanometers, just over 400, slightly into the blue. So great little marketing tactic because people will see that and oh my God, look, it's blocking it all. But yeah, the reality, it's blocking violet, which you're not being exposed to violet light indoors from your digital devices at all. So again, great little marketing tactic. But for the in person, like I know it's a really the clear lenses or the daytime lenses are a really hard one to navigate. Unless you're going to go out and fork out like $4,000 for a spectrometer, and that's the gold standard on testing these things. So the first thing you want to do is the company you're buying it from, ask them for a spectrum report. Like they should have one. It should be a verified one, not just some graphical graph they've made up for their website, which you could create in Canva. It needs to be a verified one from a proper spectrometer. So that's generally the best way. Like, and if they can't provide it, it's a bit of a red flag already. But yeah, the nighttime glasses are a bit easier to test because they block 100% of blue light. So if you can see blue light through them, e.g., if you can look at a emitting light source that's blue, it shouldn't appear blue. If it does, then that's a problem as well.
So then I guess, Daniel, let's look at some of the stealth sources of blue light, perhaps like outside of just your typical computer screen. in a typical household that people should be aware of?
Yep. Yeah. So a lot of people kind of or kind of have some idea that potentially their phones and computer screens are main sources of their blue light exposure at night. And a lot of people are kind of catching on that it's potentially not the best thing to be on these things at night before bed, and it may affect your sleep, which is true. But the biggest actual exposure we get is all our lighting in our home, or just our overhead lighting. So it didn't used to be as much of a problem as it is today. So most of us, in the typical residential home, used to have incandescent or halogen lighting, was the kind of the standard up until about 5 years ago. And there was a big switch where, for sustainability and energy efficiency, there's a big push to get rid of the incandescent and halogen on the basis that it was not energy efficient and they weren't long life. Therefore, it was unsustainable, for the environment, or having an impact on the environment. So there was a shift to move everything into LED lighting. And the big issue with that from the type of lighted output, so an incandescent or a heat source light, so they actually produce infrared light, and they're producing from heat because they've got a filament inside them that heats up and produces the light. A heat source light has very low amounts of blue light in it, and it has very, very high amounts of red, infrared, and orange in them, which is actually not a bad light source to be exposed to at night. Not perfect, certainly not perfect, because it's still got green and blue in it, but when you compare that to the LED spectrum, they're very, very different. There's a very prominent spike in that 455 nanometer blue light, and then it's very actually void of any red. It's almost non-existent. So what happened is everyone started swapping out the light bulbs in their home to be more energy efficient, which has been a big push through governments to try and even outlaw the incandescent. But the one thing they haven't really taken into account is like, cool, we're doing a great thing for the planet, but we're actually destroying our health and along the way, which is, it just blows my mind that it's been completely, disregarded completely. And you'll see like this lighting has infiltrated our lives everywhere. So it's not only in our homes, it's in our street lights, our car lights, our signs. It's everywhere. So that honestly is probably one of the biggest things that's probably affecting people's artificial light exposure. And the screens and the lights and the phones and stuff, certainly that they are a problem.
Yeah.
But the fact is that no one lives in the dark, and they all turn their lights on at night. The sun sets, all those lights come on. And what that's doing is essentially telling your brain it's the middle of the day still. It has no idea the difference because of that intense amount of blue light. Your brain is wired to receive that and consider that as midday sun.
Yeah. Now you sort of, I guess then from a practical standpoint, like what can people do? Obviously wearing blue blockers is highly beneficial at nighttime, but then what about like actually replacing globes and swapping out lights and maybe using little red office desk lights? Like, do you want to sort of expand upon what is the best practice for evening light use?
Yeah. So a while ago, a number of years ago, about 3 years ago, we've been selling the glasses for a while, and I kind of started thinking about what we were doing with the glasses, which was really trying to filter out these harmful light sources that we're being exposed to. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, what happens if we were able to stop them at the source? So like, not saying that we completely negate the need for the glasses, because the devices and stuff are still in our lives. But if we could eliminate that biggest source, everyone in the home benefits. You don't need to wear glasses, and everyone. And so, what we've done is develop the whole suite of different lighting products that can literally be used throughout the whole home. So from your overhead lighting, from recessed down lights to light bulbs, but then thinking about other ways we use lights, like bedside lamps, getting up in the night to go to the toilet, so like motion sensor lights, and really just coming up with certain ways we can actually swap out these other light sources for ones that actually have the blue light removed. And because it's you could sit here and you could do, I don't know, a room and all that, but and you get all those benefits, but then you just go and switch on a light here or something here. And it's like it almost like does itself, and it's like you kind of need to look at your environment and your lifestyle, and then try and like design your lighting around that.
Yeah. Interesting that you said that. Actually, it reminds me of, like, for example, people that wake up during the night to go to the toilet and they flick on that light. I'd imagine that immediate, just by even without looking directly into the light that comes on in the bathroom, even just by it reflecting off the walls, and for example, even if they're just like doing their best to avoid direct exposure, that would still compromise melatonin production, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's because it's not only that you would still get that exposure into the eyes. There's actually research to show that skin exposure to blue light is also a problem. So, and it's actually quite recent research that's come out. So, yeah, in the early 2000s, they actually discovered that within the eye, there's more than visual perceptors for sight. So that's when they discovered that there was actually what they call melanopsin receptors in the eye, which actually are activated from blue light, which goes straight into the brain and tells the brain that essentially that it's daytime to elevate your cortisol and stress hormones or wakefulness hormones, and keep any hormones that are responsible for winding you down and allowing you to sleep suppressed. But actually, yeah, just I think like 2007, they discovered those same receptors, melanopsin receptors, that they are present in the skin as well. So your skin actually is influencing your circadian clock to some degree. So wearing glasses is not the only solution, really. If the eyes are obviously the biggest, they are the strongest signal, because it's a very short distance from the back of your eye through the optic nerve into the brain, which is what's actually controlling your master clock of the body, controlling your day-night cycles and your hormonal profile around that. So, yeah, so it does need to come into account when you're looking at your exposure to light to go, well, I've got glasses on, but what about the rest of my body? What's the exposure happening there?
In addition to that, we can also look at, I guess, with office lighting and typical like fluorescent lighting, even maybe like classrooms and schools. I'd imagine, because I think I've seen some research on how these can impact like cortisol bioregulation and things like that. What do we know about some of the dangers associated with like fluorescent lighting in particular?
Yeah, so there's a lot of problems with fluorescent lighting. So it is the unnatural spectrum as one of them. So it's not the same as LED, but it's when you actually see a graph of that spectrum, it's got big spikes in blue and green, and it's a very disjointed spectrum. But there's actually two other issues with more prominent in the fluorescent light as well. So is flicker. So flicker is a big one. And what flicker is it's essentially the light is turning off and on very quickly based on the current, our AC power current at 60 hertz. So what that is AC power is alternating current. So it's actually pulsing power, which is just mains power. That's how it runs into our homes. And the issue with a fluorescent or even an LED is when it's receiving power, it's on, and when it's not receiving and it's off. Versus the heat source lighting like incandescents and halogens, they're a heated filament. So when it's pulsing power, well, the filament doesn't have enough time to reduce its heat and turn off. So it's not really susceptible to the same sort of flicker. And so what that flicker does is, while you can't visually see it, well, sometimes you can, it's that bad, but even though you visually can't see it, your nervous system is actually picking up on that flicker at that very high rate. It's turning off and on about 120 times a second. And that's causing neurological stress on the brain, because it's sitting there trying to process a flickering light. So in nature, there's no such thing as a flickering light. It's a direct current light source. The sun is constantly producing light. It's not turning off and on very quickly. So huge stress on the brain, which in turn overworks the brain, leads to the headaches, brain fog, fatigue. So you combine that with the spectrum as well, which also creates eye strain, headaches. So now you've got those two things in combination. It's just like a recipe for disaster. But there's also one more thing that's actually an issue with the fluorescent lighting as well. And it's more on the electromagnetic fields that are coming off it. So we're not talking Wi-Fi or RF radiation. We're talking there's there's three main issues around EMF. It's dirty electricity. The current is coming in. It's been manipulated through a transformer to produce electricity to the light. That manipulation causes the current to essentially emit quite a large field around it, which is actually detrimental to our cells. So, and then you've got electric and magnetic fields also off that. So fluorescent lighting is really, really bad for that. So, there's a lot of research around what EMFs or EMF exposure, low level exposure, constant exposure does do to our health. So there's three main issues with the fluorescent lighting that most people are under in an office or a workplace. Those three issues do exist with LED lighting in a similar way as well.
When it comes to the flicker, does that also apply with like computer screens as well, and how do you go about like optimizing your computer screen to minimize blue light exposure?
Yep. So flicker is a problem with any LED light source that's plugged into mains power. So it's not an issue with a phone because it's a direct current source from a battery. Anything battery powered is direct current, but a screen off a computer, for example, will have flicker. And so you'll see, so there's two things you can do to mitigate that. So you can look at the specifications of the monitor you're buying. There is now, the higher the hertz, these flicker-free monitors, essentially. They've created at a much higher frequency, so high that there is no really detectable flicker for the brain. And these are typically advertised as like gaming monitors or for gamers because it allows motion to be seen on a screen a lot better. So I have a gaming monitor, but I never do gaming on it. So that's the ultimate way, is getting the right hardware. The second way is there is a piece of software that you can run on your screen called Iris Tech, and that's designed not only to change the spectrum colors coming off the monitor to lower the blue light spectrum down, and you completely can change it to change with the different times of the day, but it's also got technology in it that lowers the effect of the flicker at the same time. Because when you lower or dim a screen or alter it, it can increase the flicker. So there are other blue blocking software out there that doesn't actually do the way it's actually altering the color can actually make the flicker worse. So those are the two best ways to mitigate that effect off your screens.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. When it comes to like daytime versus, I guess, like nighttime glasses, let's maybe look at it from, I guess, what are the most potent blue blocking glasses? I'd imagine they like have a pretty strong like red tint or tone to it versus like a typical day pair that you might want to wear during the day, like the ones you're wearing now. You want to sort of break down the differences between those?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a kind of a common question, is around like the day versus night, and can I have a pair that I can use for both, that's where like it really comes down to there are various separate glasses for different reasons. So we've kind of covered the issue with the daytime and trying to lower that exposure down. The key with that is like you can't block all the blue light during the day. If you put on a set of night blockers and blocked 100% of blue light during the day, you would get no blue light in your eyes. You'll be essentially telling your brain it's nighttime in the middle of the day. And a lot of people think that that's what they can do. And I'm like, you're actually going to make things worse, because you're going to start creating a circadian rhythm mismatch where your brain starts thinking it's nighttime during the day. So then when it gets to nighttime, it's like, but hold on a minute, it was nighttime like 5 hours ago. I started all these biological processes around hormonal release and stuff earlier in the day, and it's designed to work off a 24-hour cycle. Or thereabouts. So you've got to be careful with that, because blue light during the day, we need the right amounts of it, because that actually helps with our energy, mood regulation. So what it does is serotonin and dopamine are two neurotransmitters which are heavily modulated from exposure, not only to blue light, but full spectrum light. But blue light is a very, very key element of that. So if you completely remove that spectrum, you're going to start you might get some instant relief for your eyes, but over time, you're going to start seeing energy problems, mood problems start to creep in, which is then ultimately you've made your health worse off. So really at nighttime, once the sun goes down, you really need to block 100% of it. Now, it's not only 100% of blue light. There's a key piece of research that came out and it looked at all spectrums of light and melatonin suppression. And it looked at all the different frequencies to work out exactly what frequencies would suppress your melatonin. And what it actually showed was it was all light from 400 right through to 550 nanometers.
Wow.
So blue light actually finishes at 500 nanometers and the green light spectrum starts. So green light goes from 500 to 580. So it's not all of the green light spectrum, but it's about 70% of the green light spectrum. Now, it's to a lesser degree, like it's a big bell curve. So the actual peak melatonin disruption happens around the 460 nanometer mark. So it's around the mid of the blue, and then it's a downward curve from there. But there's still a large portion of suppression happening in the green light zone. So if you're wanting to be completely optimal at night, to allow your brain to understand that it is nighttime, how you would in nature, you really need to block all the blue light and the green light up to the 550 nanometer mark. Now that actually looks like, in terms of a lens, it really starts to alter the lens color to actually start stripping out those colors of light. So it is a more of a darker orange red lens that you'd be wearing at nighttime to reduce those wavelengths out. There are, like, we offer solutions where it's maybe not as intense. Like we have a lighter amber lens, which will completely eliminate just the blue spectrum, because like going down to the more intense red one, it just makes things a little bit more, like, color perception is a little bit harder. Some people maybe not like hardcore biohackers that are looking for like the nth degree of like that last little percentage of like optimal. So like there are solutions, but ultimately at a minimum it should still be blocking 100% of blue light. And again, it's not just a matter of getting an amber lens. It's getting one that's been verified. You've got a spectrum report. Now, there are some little hacks that you can do with like online tools. So we've written a blog post on this actually, and there's like, you can get, there's two colored squares you can look at through your glasses, and the blue one should turn black. Like they should look the same. And there's like a little color wheel test. So ultimately what it's doing is because what should happen to blue colors through 100% blue blocking glasses is that blue should turn into like a dark gray or a black. So you shouldn't, if you can see blue through your blue blocking glasses, there's a problem. And because the issue is even like, say you got a set of 95% blue blocking glasses, that 5% of blue light coming through. Well, first of all, what is the spectrum? Is it that 460 nanometers where it's that peak? Is it 5% at that? Now that's enough to essentially start that trigger in the brain and tell the brain and go right into the pineal gland where your melatonin's released and actually stop that from being released. So it's a matter of like ensuring the brain is getting the correct light signals at the correct time of night, so it understands that it's nighttime. So that's why it's really key for that 100%.
Yeah, you've done a really good job at it, breaking that down, because it can get very confusing for people to understand the different wavelengths. I want to also mention something that I've always really enforced, and that is like, I say good sleep starts the moment you wake up. And the reason I say this is because I'm sure you do the same thing. You probably go outside and you try and get sunlight on your face, or expose yourself, not behind a window. You want to go outside and expose yourself to the sun. Do you want to sort of explain, what does your morning routine look similar, and what are the benefits of doing that?
Yeah, you've nailed it. So the morning is, what you do during the day is actually is just as important as what you do at nighttime. So you can't just do one or the other to get the results. And that's the key, is getting up in the morning and getting that natural exposure of light. Because what that does is actually it anchors your circadian rhythm. It tells your brain it's the daytime, tells it to lower your melatonin and increase your wakefulness hormones. So if you do that consistently every morning, you're anchoring that 24-hour cycle so it can get into a rhythm. Yep. And that's because that's essentially what circadian is about, a day, and then rhythm. So it's about a day rhythm is actually what that means. Now, what you do during the daytime, like when I say that, sets you up for how well you sleep at nighttime. The way we actually make melatonin is not through the absence of blue light. So at nighttime, when we remove all the blue light from our environment, what that actually does is it triggers a conversion process from serotonin into melatonin. So you actually got to go up that ladder and go, well, how do we get high levels or adequate levels of serotonin? So that's actually getting natural light exposure during the day. So one of the key aspects of serotonin is being produced is blue light, but also near infrared light. So near infrared light is the spectrum that's produced by the sun. Near infrared light coming into the skin will increase your serotonin levels. So you've got to so what you do during the day, getting lots of natural light exposure, lots of infrared light exposure, is going to increase your dopamine, serotonin, make you feel good, give you lots of energy. But then when you then come to nighttime, the sun sets, you block all the blue light, that serotonin levels that you built up all during the day will now convert into melatonin. So we've had plenty of customers that come to us, I've bought your blockers, I've done everything, and it's not working. Like, I just still can't sleep. And then it's like, okay, well, what are you actually doing during the daytime? That's where you start to unravel things and like, well, I'm just in a dark room in my office all day. I'm never getting outside. And it's like, well, that's your problem. Like you can block all the blue light and do everything perfect at night.
Yeah.
You're still going to have low melatonin if you don't have the raw material to create melatonin.
Yeah, that's super critical. And also as part of that, I'd wonder, like, for those who can't actually go outside and expose themselves to the sun, let's say they live in the UK where it stays dark. What about the use of light boxes? Have you explored those in detail?
We have in great detail, actually. And we started looking at them because the disorder is called SAD, or seasonal affective disorder. Essentially, that is depression that is 100% caused or governed by light. Crazy. It's quite crazy because it's like, and that is verified by doctors and researchers, like this form of depression, there's no other cause of it but your light exposure or lack thereof. So you're like, and it's becoming so much of the rise in SAD is huge. And so the typical answer is, oh, you need to get a light box. And so from my research and understanding of I started looking at these light boxes and going, these are interesting because they've got all the problems I've discussed already with light, right? So what they're wanting you to do is grab this light box and turn it on. It's very, very bright light with very high amounts of blue in it, and look into it directly and what that's doing is stimulating the serotonin and dopamine, because those are mood regulators, right? So if you can stimulate them in the morning, you can get your mood up and your sleep. And so that's why people with depression have insomnia as well, because they have low serotonin. And that's what antidepressants generally try to manipulate, is your serotonin pathways and your serotonin levels. So the issue with them is very high amounts of blue, narrow bandwidth of blue with an LED light source, a flickering light source as well. So you will find some immediate relief again because it's stimulating, it's doing those things with serotonin, but ultimately you're destroying your eyes and you're not using a natural light source. So I actually spent about 2 years looking at this, going, how can we actually create something that uses the principles of what we should be doing in nature and bringing it inside? Because in these places in winter like the UK, they just don't get enough light during winter, short light cycles, people's lifestyles. So it's about using full spectrum light plus the infrared. So the infrared is a key element of that, because the infrared exposure is actually doing a far better job of actually bringing up your serotonin levels. So we created a light box, a light panel, which has a broad range of near infrared light, and it also has full spectrum light, including the blue, but it's all balanced. So what you can do with that is you can use these, have it on your desk and you shine it very bright. It's a very bright light source at the face.
What color is it?
Well, so full spectrum light looks very bright and white. Because when it's balanced, it looks very similar. Like you look at a full spectrum light source versus a typical LED, they're both very white, but one's void of all the other spectrums. So and infrared light is actually non-visible, so you can't see it. So when you combine those two together, you're not replicating. I don't like to say you're replicating the sun, because the sun has other spectrums in it, like the UV, but you're replicating the light sources from the sun that we need to help with your mood and energy levels and circadian rhythm. So using a full spectrum light source in the morning that has even amounts of the visible spectrum plus the near infrared light is the best way to supplement a lack of sunshine. I'd say supplement because it's not a replacement. There's no such thing as a replacement for the sun.
Yeah. It's basically as close as possible, I guess, is what you're trying to replicate as close as possible to the sun. Maybe do you want to actually break down to my listeners, because even this is new to me, like understanding the different wavelengths of the sun. You mentioned that the sun has like UVB, UVA, but then like, does it start from like 1 nm to all the way to like, I don't know, to 800, 900? What's the typical sun?
The sun spectrum? Yes. Yeah. So because you've got spectrums outside of that. So you go into the infrared and then you go all the way to like X-rays, and they're really high.
Wow.
So you're below 380 to, I think, I'd have to actually look up where UV starts. I think it's around around 100 to 380 is UV light. Then you go into the visible spectrum right through to red, which goes through to 680, and then the near infrared runs into far infrared. So that's going from like 680 into the near infrared is kind of in the low 800s into early 900s, and then you go into mids in the thousands. Into close to 2000 is like far infrared. So far infrared is like the real heat light source. So that's why you got like far infrared saunas, which heat you up. But that's kind of the spectrum of the sun. So you're starting right down in the UV, you come into all the visible, and then you go right through into the infrared. And they all every kind of spectrum from the sun has completely different biological impacts on our body. And generally it's not wise to try and isolate one and use it without it being in balance. So for example, like UV light in isolation can cause skin damage and cause skin cancer. But UV light is also essential for health, right? UVB light is what we use to create vitamin D, which actually is not a vitamin, it's a hormone. It's one of the most essential hormones in the body. And so even the use of like sunscreen, right, will block UVB. So it's crazy. And we're being drilled into us that, and to be sun smart, go outside, make sure you never get your skin exposed to sun without being protected. It's about safe exposure. So you need that exposure to get adequate levels of vitamin D. And some people will just say, oh, well, I could supplement with a vitamin D supplement, right? But again, that's not the same as getting sun exposure, because there's other biological processes that take place that ultimately ends up with you getting high vitamin D. But so like our light thing doesn't have UV in it. UV is a very, very tricky one to get right, because too much of it is going to be a problem. So it's really quite hard to give someone a panel or something and say, use this, but be smart about it, because the UV side of the spectrum is very, very much breaking down and causing damage to the skin. But when you introduce that with infrared, they kind of cancel each other out. The regenerative side and the more breaking down side is all in balance. So that's kind of like, I like to say, like nature has like antidotes to everything, right? So like, the blue light, the antidote is the red light, the UV, the antidote is the infrared. So when it's in balance, everything kind of works like it should.
Yeah. So Daniel, what about like the evolution? I'd love to learn about like the path in which you took, like the original concept, maybe the first design pair that you maybe thought about, and maybe let's look at the full spectrum of products that you guys offer now. If my audience wants to learn more.
Where we started was with the big welding glasses, sold them for a couple of years. And I guess where we've evolved to now is creating different lenses for the different times of the day. So we've actually got 4 different lenses now. I think would be probably one of the only ones that does that. And it's really recognizing that people have different needs as well. So you've got 2 different daytime lenses. We've got the clearer looking one, and then we've got the yellow ones, which I'm wearing now. And the key difference between them is the yellow ones are more powerful. They're for more people that are more light sensitive, maybe have really bad migraines. They completely eliminate that 455 nanometer spike, but then they allow all the blue light past 455 through, which helps with your serotonin, helps you feel good. So you're getting all you're essentially taking out all the harmful, keeping all the good. So, but people may want the clearer looking ones because they're in a social setting or an office and they want something that looks more normal. And then we go to the nighttime. You've got the amber and then the red ones. So we kind of discussed the ambers blocks 100% of the blue. The reds will block 100% of the blue and green to the 550. And what we've done is we've essentially now got a whole range of different styles and looks for them. And we've also got, like, you can do full prescriptions. We've got an optics lab now that we work with, so we can do essentially any prescription, any magnification. We're pretty equipped in that front from the glasses. Where things really get interesting is the lighting for us. Like, that's probably where we've innovated the most. So we've got amber light bulbs that block 100% of the blue light, similar to the amber glasses. Then we've got red ones that strip down the green light as well. And one of the biggest innovations we created was a full spectrum light bulb. So we talked about full spectrum light and why you want that during the day. A common thing we were getting once we started selling these light bulbs is, I love your lights, they're awesome for night, I'm getting awesome sleep, but I kind of work in a darker office. What sort of light should I use during the day? And I was struggling to recommend anything because I couldn't recommend our lights because they didn't have any blue light in them. And you want the blue light during the day, but I also couldn't recommend conventional lighting for all the issues with it. So I was kind of like, go outside sort of thing, and it wasn't a solution. So we went about, how can we actually create a full spectrum light source which has the equal levels of all the spectrums? And we did that. It took us about a year. We did it, but we actually didn't then release it because I started testing it and I was like, this is not very practical, because I've now got these lights here that for daytime, they're full spectrum, because you don't want these on at nighttime because they've got the blue light. And then I have to have these lights over here, which I turn on at night, and it just turned into a mess. I was like, because my partner was like having these, I'm like, no, you got to turn those ones off. Like, no. It's like, oh, geez, this is a mess. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and we're like, how can we actually incorporate both of those technologies into the same bulb? And then while still conforming with the values of our company, which is ensuring that everything we create is beneficial for your health and there's no harm in other ways. So things like EMFs needed to be taken into account, because there's a lot of smart bulb technology out now. You can use your smartphone to control them, remotes and all that. And the issues with them is they're creating a lot of RF radiation in the home, especially if you've got 40 lights in your home and they're all transmitting a Wi-Fi signal. So what we did is we actually were able to create it by literally using the light switch. So you can just turn it off and on and it will change modes. And so what we actually did is created 3 modes in it. So you've got the full spectrum day mode, then you've actually got a lower blue mode, and then a full no blue mode. So you can kind of use it to replicate the different phases of the sun. So it's almost we call it like a circadian light bulb.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it's called the BioLight. So it's just because it's for your biology, and it's a light that aligns with the sun sort of thing. So that's been the biggest game changer that we've created. I'm pretty proud of that one. And I haven't seen anyone else do it properly. All those other things kind of exist in isolation, or they'll have color ones, but they don't understand full spectrum light, and they don't understand the flicker. The flicker is a really, really important part of it. And that's also a very, very hard thing to quantify yourself without the expensive gear. And the issue is there are some companies out there that will say, our light bulbs are flicker free, which is cool because they're taking advantage of people because they can't test it. So for example, we've taken our light bulbs and we've given them to building biologists who have all the very expensive equipment to test light sources, and they can essentially validate and use $30,000-$40,000 meters that they do home assessments with and go, okay, well, here's the actual levels of flicker. That's all what we do. We kind of ensure that what we create as a light source is not just blue light free or one of these elements. It's incorporating all the issues and ensuring that the light source in your home is beneficial, is essentially not causing harm to you in any other ways, is kind of we look at when we're creating a product.
Yeah, that's great. I just thought about actually if you guys offered a concierge service where, like, let's say I went around my house and I filmed all of the different lights, in different rooms and where I spend most of my time, and I had you guys say, install this one here, install that one there, wear these glasses in this room. Like, that service to me would be like invaluable. I would definitely do that.
We do something similar. Like, we have people like come to us with their house plans, and they're like, cool, like how many lights do you think I need? And we'll kind of like map it out for them. Because a big thing, and especially now in like modern homes, is recessed down lights are very common now. So they don't take light bulbs anymore. So people are sitting there going, oh, I want your light bulbs, but like I can't. It's like a recessed unit and that's sealed. So we actually sell those now as well. So we're like, so we'll quite regularly get like an architect that's working with someone come to us and be like, yeah, that we want your lights, and we'll kind of map it out for them and do like a lighting design. That's kind of something we've been starting to do just to help people, work out where they need lights and what's going to work well in different situations for them.
Yeah, awesome. And just for my listeners, so where can they, if they want to learn more, obviously the website, you want to let them know the website, and also further resources as well. Like, are you guys on Instagram and YouTube, things like that?
Yeah, so our website is Block Blue Light, or a word. We've got .com as our main site for North America, but then we've also got blockbluelight.com.au for Australia, and then .co.nz for New Zealand, and then .co.uk for the United Kingdom. So we've got like local warehouses everywhere just to make things work pretty smoothly. In terms of other resources, we're pretty heavy on research and blogs. So we've got a whole 80 or 90 blogs on our website as well, which is really good. And our Instagram as well, Block Blue Light Official. We we try and release some educational stuff on there as well. That's a big part of what we do, is try to break down a lot of the science and research, and then put it into digestible blogs and stuff for people to understand. Because like for a lot of people, it's like overwhelming just to understand like nanometers and this and that. And so it's like we like to look at PubMed and look at research, and then try and bring that into a digestible form for people to understand it a bit easier.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you've done a terrific job, Daniel, at breaking down the differences in light and also how it impacts our health. For those listening in, I will leave a link to the websites that Daniel just outlined. But yeah, it's great to have you on the show. I mean, this is going to be a really, really high impact episode, and I learned so much. So I just wanted to say massive thanks for coming on the show, Dan.
Yeah, no worries. Always love sharing the message and getting it out there for people to start bringing some awareness to it in their lives.
Awesome. Well, we'll be in touch, and otherwise, thanks everyone for listening in. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Thank you everyone for joining in to today's episode. For in-depth show notes and lessons learned, visit nofilter.media/boost your biology.
This has been a No Filter Media production.
Say what you want.